springtime hopefully comes here in the prairies of Canada, I'm going to do an oil change on the Square. Haven't been doing much work to her since we did the paint job here, but it's been sitting. I've been using it as a tow vehicle around my shop. I do the odd customer help out if they get stuck, nothing crazy. So the truck's ultimately just been sitting in the back row here and doing work for us around the shop. So I usually do about a year on my oil changes. I don't put any more than 5,000 K on. I usually run a synthetic. So this video is just some maintenance of the truck. Also probably a generic oil change video for people how to change oil in any vehicle. You know, I watched a YouTube video and the guy lined up 10 plus liters of oil for his oil change, literally pulled my hair out, and he dumped a pile of it in. Kind of crazy. So probably anything to any oil change, know how many liters or quarts your vehicle takes. These LSs, for instance, these Gen 3s, they're 5.7 liters here, or 6. You can put 6 in it usually with a longer filter. You'd be a little bit over full. It's not going to hurt anything. So step number one to any good oil change, know your filter and know how much oil your engine actually takes. Owner's manual, I mean, this one is not going to be too good because we've definitely modified on this puppy. So usually your owner's manual will have, you know, how much oil that engine will take. And find out your oil filter. Also, another good thing to grab is have an air filter. You know, it's sometimes dirty. You pop the hood, oh crap, you check on it, it's not great. So it's good to have one handy on the shelf. Stick it in when you need it. That way you're not doing the oil change. Yeah, I'll get one, and 2 months down the road it's really plugged. So I'm gonna lift this up and start draining the oil. That's the first thing we're gonna do. Drop the filter and drop the oil bung. So stay with me and watch how I do an oil change. Okay, next step, after you know what kind of oil your engine takes, the quantity, and your filter, put it up on jack stands, ramps, whatever have you. I'm obviously a mechanic, so I want to hoist. A little bit easier for me, so up it goes. So usually the oil bungs on these LSs are 13 or 15 millimeter. So make sure you got the proper socket. It's nothing more frustrating than putting on a standard socket and half stripping the bung. It really sucks. Another bit of advice I can give is definitely, you know, crack your oil filter loose beforehand. Just make sure it's loose that way. Sometimes if you got a really stuck oil filter and then you drain the oil, it kind of sucks because then you end up bathing in the oil. So this way there's nothing running, coming out. You can crack that oil filter really easy. These LSs are really easy to change on. And then make sure you're turning the filter properly, obviously. You're not going to tighten the living crap out of it. This one wasn't super tight. Nice, I didn't have to kill myself to undo it. Also, you know, when you're doing an oil change, make sure, I like to have an engine fairly decently warm. The oil comes out, all that stuff is suspended in the oil, so it's easy to get out. Nice time to do an oil change after you run your truck through a creek crossing and multiple miles of back roads or snowbanks. You get a free shower, so it's going to come out in a hurry on this one because it does have a straight out exit, so you might want to be ready for it. Then you can undo your oil filter too, once the pound slows down a little bit. And then get a good drain on that oil, get everything you can out of there. Now some vehicles do have a cartridge style oil filter up top in the engine. Chevy Ecotech, you know, 2 2s, 2 4s, 1.4 I think. There's a few Dodges out there too, anything with the Pentastar V6. They got a filter up top. I usually like to undo those filters before, you know, even draining on the oil. It just helps get all the oil you can out of that engine and get a proper kind of change on it. Okay, filter's off, oil's draining, so we're gonna go to our next step. Moving right along, the next thing is our tire pressures. We're gonna check on them, see what they're at on this old girl, and we're gonna run 35 in these boggers. If you're not sure on what kind of tire pressure you want or you should have, there's a tire placard usually right in the door. It's gonna tell you what your tire pressures are and your tire size. So I'm gonna go around, I'm gonna check all four. While I'm checking all four, here at the shop, we're gonna be checking for 30 seconds difference front to rear. If they're gonna need a tire rotation, we're gonna check on cupping, wear issues. Vehicles with independent rear suspension, they can wear out just like the front end, and you can get the same symptoms, you know, cup tires wearing inside edges due to toe being out or loose parts. So we're gonna check all the tires for wear, tire pressures, and make sure everything's correct. Moving right along, I'm back underneath the car, truck in this instance. We're gonna be checking on the front diff, rear diff, and transfer case oil levels. All-wheel drive vehicles today, they usually have a PTU or a PTO, whatever you wanna call it, and it's gonna drive those rear wheels and that rear diff. So you wanna check on those, it's very important. As a shop owner, this is probably where I make some good money, because people who are doing home oil changes don't necessarily check. The transfer case in trucks is a big one. We see lots of like a seal leaking. They've done their home oil changes, they've never topped up their transfer case, and it's exploded, and then we get to put in a transfer case. So make sure you're checking on all those fluids underneath the vehicle. Also, don't shortcut it. This is very important. Take your time, look it up, make sure your levels are all good. Obviously too, with four-wheel drive truck, I use this one primarily off-road. I want to make sure there's no water in my diffs. This one isn't like my last one. My diffs, my vents are very low here. I'm gonna have to move those up because I do like to push some water with this thing, and that's just a recipe to filling up the front diff with water and having multiple failures in there. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna start checking on all my fluids underneath here. Well, I'd say she's getting some water in there, definitely. It's definitely not the greatest color, so I'm gonna have to tear this bad boy apart sometime and put some inner seals in it and deal with the little bit of milkiness in there, that's for sure. Now, depending on the diff, rear diff or front diff, they got different places of putting the bung and what we use to check it. This one's just a 3/8 hex head square on a ratchet. It's not bad to do, so. I'd assume this one is low, as my axle seals do tend to leak on this 8.5. This truck definitely needs some attention on the differentials. I was hoping to do some differential work to it. I kind of want to re-gear it. Alrighty, well there's no water in it, but it's definitely dark, but it's not the end of the world. At least there's some oil in there, you know, judging by my dipper. It's right close to the edge. So we're gonna leave that alone. That one's actually good compared to the front. So I'm gonna move on and go to the transfer case. Next is the transfer case. Obviously make sure you're undoing the proper bung. I've seen it before in other shops where I was working that, you know, somebody, for whatever reason, this one's really clear. Obviously it's the top one, but sometimes they're close depending on what kind of transfer case it is. Make sure you're not undoing that one, because it is definitely a torrent of fluid coming out of it always. So we're just gonna check on this T case. This 208 I have, she's a little bit slimy. Looks like the speedo cable and that rear extension housing seal's leaking a bit. Nothing too crazy. I know I'm not too worried about it on this one. Also, when tightening any oil bung, you don't have to sand it into oblivion. You want it snug, but I know a lot of times they come in and we've had to drill them out or, you know, extract them somehow. It's a pain in the butt. So you just don't want to. I'm using a fairly big ratchet on this one, obviously. I don't have to send it, you know, to the ends of the earth for tightness. So we're gonna dip that in there, see what we got for fluid. It's in there, you know, it's a little ways down, but these old 208s, they definitely hold a fair bit as the bung's right at the top. It's pretty crazy. So I'm really good and full. It's really nice and clean. It's red from the swap. So we're gonna tighten that up and we're done here. Also, if you have a standard transmission, you're gonna wanna check it too. Take this time and check on it. I'm gonna pull the bung on the transmission here, but I'm gonna do up my filter and my oil bung before I get too crazy, because the transmission oil bung's right in the way there in the oil cart in this instance. So we're gonna just snug this up a little bit, and that should do all your drivetrain. Obviously, if this was an automatic, you'd be checking the transmission once you put oil in and it's running. Right now, we're gonna just finish up on the oil change before I go ahead and check on that manual transmission. So we're gonna move on to doing the oil filter and the bung. This next big thing is you're gonna watch and make sure your old oil filter O-ring is on that oil filter, because if it stays up there and you do the dreaded double gasket, once you fill up your vehicle with oil and start it, it's gonna empty in a quick hurry. I've seen it, I've done it, unfortunately. Also, you'll know that that oil filter ain't gonna feel right as you're turning it on. If you ever do miss that filter, it definitely feels different. I've had lots of O-rings stick on oil filters, and you can definitely feel the difference when tightening. But always double check, make sure you're not, you didn't lose that O-ring off your old filter. You can go ahead too and put some oil in your filter. I'm not against that, but obviously if it's an SUV, a front wheel drive car, that it's in a goofy spot, you're not gonna be able to do that. You're gonna just put it on there. And I usually just make sure it's snug kind of, and then I give it an extra turn with the oil filter wrench. You don't have to go crazy. Like, I could probably tighten that thing to oblivion, and it's just gonna be difficult. You just want it good and snug that you can't loosen it. Next is that oil bung. You're gonna make sure your gasket's all good. That way you don't have a drip. If you're worried about it, you can put a little bit of pipe dope, on there to seal it up with copper washers. I know on diesel, like the Duramax Chevy diesel, I like to put a little bit of pipe dope always on the oil bung. It always seems that they like to seep even with a new washer sometimes, so I like to give those a little bit of extra stuff to prevent the leak for a customer. But we're gonna snug on that oil bung. There again, you're not gonna send it to oblivion. You just want it nice and snug. Then you can clean it up. We have brake clean in bulk, so I just got these pressurized containers. You're gonna wanna clean on all your mess. That way it's nice and neat, and for us, it doesn't result in a comeback from a customer complaining about there's oil dripping on my garage floor. So you just clean it all up, spray it all up. This part too, I'm gonna check on the manual transmission oil. It's up along the side here. I'm gonna check on that. If you had an automatic, you're obviously gonna check up top for that. But as long as the filter's tight, the bung's tight, we're all clean. You can also clean your differentials. Sometimes, if it's the fluid's right up there, it's topped up, stuff's gonna come out, so then we hit it with brake clean also, clean some of that staining up, that way it's not leaking on the customer's floor. But I'm gonna go ahead and check my transmission quickly, and then we're gonna move on to the next step. Oil filter's on there, oil bung's in there, that's all finished up. So we're gonna hit the truck with a grease gun, or your vehicle. Make sure you check it. A lot of trucks and cars today have no grease nipples at all. Some of the heavy duty stuff does, 3/4 tons, 1 tons. But for the most part, half tons have next to nothing, unless parts have been changed and there are greasable parts on it. But more than likely, your cars, SUVs, everything comes from the factory now with no grease nipples. This Chevy here, we got outer tie rods to grease. I do have to do my U-joint tie rods, or my U-joints, I have to do on my front axle, and I have to check all my drive shafts because I got grease nipples on all my U-joints on my drive shaft. So I'm gonna go ahead and do all that and get that finished.
Okay, now before setting it down, we're just going to do a quick walk around the truck. We're going to check leaf springs, we're going to check shocks, we're just keeping an eye out on everything. You can also peek in your wheels and check your brakes, and if you got that all done, it's ready to bring down.
I got my funnel in there, and I'm just gonna start adding oil. We know this LS takes 5.76 liters of oil roughly. So these jugs are 4.7 liters. So we're gonna put one full jug in. We got the filter, we got some oil in the filter already. So we're just gonna pour some in here. I mean, I'm gonna add some from the other jug, obviously. You know, it's gonna be another liter at least. But in this case, you know, a word of advice I could give anybody on filling any vehicle, if you're, you know, it's easier to add than take away, because once it's in there, it's a pain in the butt to get back underneath and drain it all again. So, you know, if you want to start up your vehicle on it, guessing at 5.7, be close to it. Don't be super under it. I mean, it would work if it was 5.5 or whatever. It's always easier to top it up afterwards than drain a bunch out. So I'm gonna go grab a little bit more. We're gonna fill it up. After that, we're gonna check on, you know, the air filter. In this case, it's super easy on this one because it's a cold air intake. So it's not hard. It's not hard to check on that. I got a cover on it. I can do it even right now. It's not that. I just serviced it in spring. It looks pretty good, so I'm gonna leave it alone. It does see a bit of gravel, but I had it all serviced up in August. I did it, you know, so it's doesn't have that many K. So we're just gonna add a liter roughly, or guess on it. Hopefully I'm right, and hopefully I don't have to drain any out. I did use a little bit longer filter on this one. That can help. It's gonna take a little bit more oil. You're also, when you're underneath the hood, you're gonna go ahead and check on your power steering. On this LS, it's down on the driver's side. You're gonna top up your washer fluid. You're gonna check your antifreeze level. In winter up here, we check on strength too during an oil change in the shop. You're also gonna keep an eye on your brake fluid. Unless you got a leak underneath that vehicle, do not add to the brake fluid. If it's really low, that means your pads are low and you should be taking the tires off and getting in there. I've seen too many times people, oh, I topped up my brake fluid, and then we go to do a brake job and we push the calipers back or whatever, and there's oodles of fluid oozing out everywhere. It makes for one hell of a mess. So if you're doing your oil change underneath your hood and you see your brake fluid low, either you got a leak or your pads are really low. Either way, they should be taken to a mechanic, or if you address it. Don't neglect your brakes. So we're gonna pull the funnel out and we're gonna flash this up. My coolant and my power steering level are good. I checked them, they're up. So I don't have to check it right now, but we're gonna go ahead and start this thing up, let it run. Make sure you're watching your gauge, make sure your engine builds oil pressure. If it isn't, shut it down, check what's going on. You know, did you leave the filter loose? Did you double gasket it? So just watch that oil pressure gauge or oil light, or a dummy light they call it, if you don't have an oil pressure gauge. So I'm gonna fire this up now. One thing I did, I just checked the power steering here. And one thing I did forget to mention, a lot of vehicles nowadays are coming with electric power steering, so obviously you're not gonna check that. If your motor doesn't have a pump and a reservoir, sometimes the reservoir is up on the sides, they put them. So if it doesn't have a reservoir or somewhere, it's a good possibility your vehicle does have electric steering. You know, SUVs, cars, trucks, half tons are now coming with electric power steering. So, you know, the hydraulic power steering is kind of going the way of the dodo, obviously, on the light passenger vehicles. So we're gonna flash this thing up now. I'm gonna go ahead and start it. What I do after I start it, I make sure the gauge, obviously my engine's building oil pressure. I can get out, I can check underneath it, no drips. I'm gonna turn on all the lights and do a walk around check on my lights. Also at this time, if you have an automatic transmission, this would be the time when you check. You have to read the dipstick. Chevys are usually more than likely in park. Dodges, I think it is, they like to be in neutral. It's best to refer to the owner's manual or right on the dipstick. And also nowadays, brand new vehicles usually don't even have a dipstick. So it's something gone to the wayside. You have to take it in, or, you know, be equipped to properly read them, with a scan tool, a temperature. But on these older rigs, you definitely have a dipstick and you can check it underneath the hood. This being a standard, I checked the tranny, it's all good, so no need for that. So I'm gonna start her up and we'll see how we make out. sits, you want to let it sit for a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes I usually leave it, to let that oil drain down, settle in the pan, then you can pull that dipstick and check on it. What I do now is I'm going to make an oil change sticker. We got a little machine here that spits them out, so that's not so hard for me. You can find oil change stickers anywhere. Napa, I think, has them here in town. So the little stick-on window ones, you can get them from multiple different places. That, or at least put, you know, a marker with tape underneath there, write your mileage, the date if you're not using your vehicle all too often like this one. I usually do it annually, so I also write the date on my oil change sticker when I did change it. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to pull the dipstick and see how we made out with level. Okay, the sticker is made. I put it in there. The truck's been sitting for a few minutes, so we're going to put that dipstick in there and see how I made out. And on this Chev, on these LSs, there's little dots in there. It's easy to see. You kind of want it on that top dot. I'm right on the bottom of the top dot, so I'm going to leave it. If the oil drains down, I'm right there. It's down here perfect. And if you're a hair over, it's not the end of the world. If it's a lot over inches, you're definitely going to want to drain that. You don't want something to happen to your engine by the oil being whipped and getting air pockets in it, and your engine sucking up, or your oil pump sucking up air and basically starving your engine for oil. Make sure it's at the proper level. This is my rendition of how I do an oil change. There's probably many out there. This is just how I do it. It's not that hard to tackle it. Make sure you got your proper oil for it, like your viscosity, your quantity, your filter. Those are big major things. Tools to undo the oil bung. I don't know how many times we get underneath there and somebody's tried to do the oil change and they've stripped it. Don't be scared to tackle it. It's not that hard to do. If you don't feel comfortable, find a reputable shop and get them to do it. And once again, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment below if you want me to show you something on the truck. I can help you out the best I can. See you later.